Good morning. Thank you everyone for coming to our camp on Friday morning. Stanford Web Camp is an event that is done by Stanford Open Source Lab. Stanford's Open Source Lab has been advocating for open 2007, and today we have an honor of having Tom Calloway to present with us about challenges of open source since 2024. Tom has been with open source forever, but recently joined the new kid on the open source blog, Amazon Web Services. With this, I give it to Tom.
Unmuted. Excellent. Here. As mentioned, my name is Tom Calloway. Most of my friends call me Spot. It's just that sort of internet nickname that I've carried around forever. It's not an insult in any way, I promise. As mentioned, I am an open source strategist for Amazon Web Services. Today, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. Because I am a corporate cog, I have to give the disclaimer, and we'll get that out of the way as quickly as can. But I want to talk about some challenging open source. Open source has fundamentally changed the way that people use software everywhere. Pretty much everyone on the planet is using open source solutions today, which wasn't the case when I started working on it. But that's not to say that there's not challenges that open source still faces today. We still face a number of challenges around things like project sustainability, diversity and inclusion, corporate involvement, fake licensing, generative things, and throw out some ideas on how I think some of these might be addressed in the future. Certainly not the only possible ideas, but just some food for thought.
Oh, hold on, the screen's no longer on Zoom.
The screen's no longer on Zoom. EA technology, isn't it great?
Yeah.
I don't know why it's not updating. The good news is for those of you who are watching along on you just got to see my agenda slide not pop up, so no real content is missing. Let's see, new share.
There it is. I'm just going to leave this here so you can move it.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to close this window, and I'm going to see how long it takes it to update, because I'm clicking next slide. We're going to wait.
It's okay. People are still coming in.
And we're waiting. And we're waiting. Let's see if I click new share, if it triggers it to do it. It does. Okay, so that's the hack. All right. Yay, proprietary. Okay. So as mentioned before, my employer is Amazon Web Services. I am not here speaking on behalf of them today. My opinions are my own. They are gracious enough to let me go out and speak my mind. I work for a team called Open Source Strategy and Marketing. It was named that way so that our acronym could be awesome, and so we could refer to ourselves as the awesome team. That's the kind of geeks we are. So my role as an open source strategist is what I do is I joke that I sleep a lot, but that's really not true. What I actually do is I build practical strategy around AWS fundamentally is a company that is 30,000 startups that are taped together by a legal and a finance department. And they get the opportunity to make the decisions that are right for them. That's very different from a lot of large corporations where strategy is sort of pushed top down to each level of the organization. All of these groups basically get to act like the startups they are. They get to make choices that are right for what they're trying to accomplish. So it's not a place where I can just say, these are the laws of open source, thou shalt follow. Okay. And they ignore it and they do whatever they want anyways. So I really have to work with them to show them the value of being a good citizen around open source, about making smart choices when they choose which software to consume and to depend upon. And I also work with external open source communities to help them to be sustainable and reliable. The technologies and the groups and the people that we depend on at AWS to be around tomorrow, to be continually fixing software, maintaining software, features to software. that doesn't just happen magically. Like there needs to be an investment back into those communities in order for that to work. So I spend a lot of time talking to those communities to help them understand what we can do and to listen to what they want us to do in return. So I want to start off, I'm going to click the new share hack, see if I can get this to work again. It does. Excellent. I want to start off giving credit where it's due. I want to give credit to the Drupal community. I mean, 23 years of being open source is an incredible run. And everybody that's involved in that community should be incredibly proud of everything that has been accomplished as a result of that. Obviously, the software is powerful and has impacted the internet in ways you can't even imagine what the internet would look like without Drupal today. But I think it's actually more important to talk about the community that Drupal has built. Drupal paved the way for a huge number of practices that we endorse and love today. But one of the things that really stands out to me about Drupal is how forward-thinking they were when it came to being diverse. They are consciously inclusive in the ways that the community structure is built. And that's huge. Like they are the lighthouse for that in looking at open source. Open source in 2024 is infinitely better off because of Drupal and its community. And to be clear, I mean, nominal fair use terms, there is no endorsement implied or intended between AWS or Drupal. Okay, great. We've gotten that out of the way. Do my little hacky hack here, and we're good. So I want to start off by sort of saying that one of the things I tell to teams at Amazon when I'm working with them is this: open source is more than a license. Yes, obviously, the open source license is important in enabling the core behaviors that open source provides, the right to use, the right to distribute, but it really is just one step. Open source is fundamentally about people working together. And that's what's interesting to me, not the licensing. The licensing is just that glue that states to the world, this is the way that we're doing things. The people are the ones actually doing those things in practice. So when I talk about, a lot of times if I'm talking about sustainability to a large crowd, their mind immediately goes to environmental sustainability because that's the context we hear it in, day out. And that's important. I'm not trying to downplay that, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about green buildings or planting flowers or, food. What I am talking about is sustainability as a concept, the quality of being able to continue over a period of time. And I think that's what's important in open source when I talk about sustainability. So what I've done is I've created a definition that allows me to extend that definition of sustainability over to open source. And I'm going to click my little share button to get to do it again. One of the concepts that we have at Amazon is the idea of being able to map processes as a flywheel. Successful processes ought to keep turning on themselves and reinforcing themselves. And open source projects, when they're healthy, can be modeled in absolutely this way. So we've got this definition of open source as the quality of an open source project that has the necessary resources, human, technological, logistical, and financial, to regularly release code and content, to have a diverse and growing user and contributor base, to address and resolve bugs in a responsive manner, to encourage and include external non-maintainer contributions, and to minimize single points of failure. If you're doing most of these things, you're probably doing well. If you're doing all of these things, you're doing amazing and you should keep doing it. But again, we don't shoot for perfection. We just shoot for growth and evolution in the projects. Now, the flywheel that I was talking about, when you want to think about an open source community in the context of that flywheel, you start by understanding that users are going to find an open source project. They were looking for something that solved a problem they had. They start to use it. They find and report issues. Those issues get addressed, which makes the software better, which attracts more users. There's a second flywheel that happens at the same time, which is sort of the growth model for a user. A user who's using a piece of software gets involved in the community, starts to participate, starts to report bugs. They start to go from just a user to someone that's reporting issues. They start to go from someone that's reporting issues to someone that's sending in fixes, someone that's helping review other people's fixes, becoming a contributor, becoming a committer, becoming a maintainer. And then the more have, the more open users are to participating in the process. New users come in and that cycle just keeps turning. Now, whenever you talk about open source sustainability, it is required by law that you show this XKCD cartoon. So I'm getting in my obligatory viewing of it here. In case some of you have been living in a cave for the last very long time, this cartoon points out a digital infrastructure diagram, and at the right there is one very precarious piece that some random person in Nebraska has been thanklessly maintaining since 2003. And this is huge. This is a very big problem for open source today. I mean, jokes aside, there are any number of examples that we can point to that demonstrate that it is not just enough to think about an immediate piece of software or even its immediate first level dependencies. You have to be aware of the broader ecosystem that is powering that software. The removal of LeftPad, which was an 11-line package with only 10 stars on GitHub when it was removed, gives us this example of how deep and unstable our open source dependency chains are. Dependencies are often invisible. Log4j taught us that, you know, how many people raised their hand and said, oh, we're fine. We don't have Log4j installed in our environment. I'll tell you a story about Amazon. When Log4j happened, for our Java team to write tooling to hot patch running Java instances for the Log4j exploit than it was for us to find all the places that Log4j was running in our environment. We did open source that hot patch tool. So if you're still wanting to hot patch your Java for Log4j, we have that out there. But a lot of times you have these open source dependencies that you don't know that you have. Whenever a customer tells me, oh, we don't have open source, more about your environment, because I think that might not be accurate. One of the things that I want to really emphasize when we're talking about sustainability is the concept of burnout. See if I can get this to work here. I have to do my little dance, and the slide shows up perfect. A lot of maintainers are doing hard, thankless work, and at some point decide they're done. They don't always even say they're done. They just away. They go decide something else is more interesting. They build train sets. They garden. But nobody else is really aware that this thing is gone, that there's no one behind it anymore. And sometimes this opens the door for nation state attackers to introduce malware that affect others in the dependency chain because they can find a weak link. They can walk up to XZ and say, hey, it looks like you're really done with this. I'd love to take over. And again, we don't want to pretend that this isn't happening. We don't want to pretend that all the software that is out there that we use is well maintained. Even if it's still getting irregular commits, that does not necessarily mean that it's well maintained, that all the things are being thought through, and that all the aspects of where it sits in the ecosystem are taken care of. There are a huge number of single points of failure in open source. All right. So if we look, which is the centralized home for open source Node.js. In 2014, a study found that 93% of packages in NPM had a single maintainer. That is one person who has the access to make changes and to push new versions in NPM. In 2022, a friend of mine named Josh Bressers at Anchor looked at the entire history of all NPM releases up to that point and found that 64% of all releases over the entire history of Node were done by a single maintainer. In 2019, the University of Michigan Ann Arbor found that of the packages in the Python package index, PyPI, 85.22% of them were single authored packages. A 2016 study of popular projects on GitHub found that nearly half of all contributors in their sample only contributed once. All of these things are single points of failure across an ecosystem. So what do we do? You know? Cloning, not an option yet. We're working on it at Amazon Web Services. The initial results are very sketchy. There was a fly that got in there. We're really sorry about that. If anyone sees a flying human, please return it to Amazon. But there is a company out there called Tidelift that is very inspirational. And one of the things that they do is they run a regular survey and they talk to open source maintainers. And when you ask what they want, they universally answered the same thing as number one. And this is not going to be shocking to anyone. It's money. They would like to be compensated for their work. And that's fair. But if you change the question and say, okay, ignoring money, beyond money, what would you like that is non-financial? How valuable would these types of help be? 89% said help improving the experience for users and contributors would be valuable for them. And that might be surprising because I don't think that was the thing that a lot of people would have picked as the... But they wanted to make it easier for people to be part of their community, because there is a recognition from maintainers that you can't just grab another maintainer out of thin air, that these don't just sort of spring to life fully formed. They have to grow and nurture inside the community. They have to work on the project for a long window of time. They have to build up the credit and the respect and the experience to be qualified to do that, so that someone can say, okay, now I've got a pool of people who've been doing excellent work that I can promote up to the next level and have them become maintainers, so that I can step aside and know that this project is in experienced, invested hands. 85% said help improving the documentation. Again, it's hard to have users if they can't figure out how to use it correctly. 75% said they wanted help marketing the project to find new contributors and new source, because a lot of open source projects don't do any marketing whatsoever. They simply upload something onto the internet and say, here it is, I made this. Diversity and inclusion is a big part of what makes a community useful. It is a collection of bugs. Yes. Yeah, all these bugs are present in your project. And if you don't have a diversity, you're only going to see the ones you're used to seeing. You're only going to see the ones that you're exposed to. Linus's law is, with many eyes, all bugs are shallow. But you need to make sure that you have lots of different sorts of eyes that are looking across your project. If all I ever do is use the software in one specific way, I'm only ever going to see bugs in that specific path. You need people who are using the software in a diverse set of combinations to bring these additional bugs to the table. One of the things that Amazon can do that is, we expose some bugs that only come out at extreme scale. When you push something beyond the limits of what you think is reasonable and sane, and we agree, sometimes those are insane things that we're doing, we find bugs, and we find bugs that no one has ever found before. And us being able to bring those bug fixes to the table is useful, because that means that no one else has to go down that path. We can bring our unique perspective on the problem space to an open source project. But more honestly, projects participate in, because diversity is not just use case, it is human diversity. The experiences that people have that are different in their lives bring color and value into these communities and make these projects better. And so you want these projects to be intentionally inclusive, not just, oh, so there happen to be a whole bunch of people that don't look like me here. You need to go out and say, we want people, no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, no matter what you subscribe, personal beliefs or your gender or any of these things are, we want you here. And every project needs a code of conduct that backs that up. And it needs to enforce that code of conduct. It doesn't just be a piece of paper that you stick to the break room wall. It's something that you actually follow up on, and that you say, hey, when someone breaks the code of conduct, we have actions that we're going to take as a community to not let that pass. We do a lot of open source on my team. This is a terrible chart that you should not try to stare at too closely, but I will explain what it is. And for the folks on Zoom, you need me to click the button so you can see it. There it is. This is a graph that shows two metrics that we track, which are called pony factor and elephant factor. Now, pony factor is how many individuals it takes to reach 50% of the contributions of a project in a window of time. So that is showing a very active project. This is OpenJDK. This has a very high pony factor. When you look at individuals, you get to a pony factor of 40 before you hit 50% of the contributions over the window of time that we're looking at here. That's amazing. But a lot of projects, especially smaller ones, can have pony factor numbers from 1 to 3. And those are really big red flags for us when we look at a project. If we don't like to, sometimes people use all describe the single point of failure that is here. I prefer the terminology eaten by raptors because it gets the point across, but the raptors aren't coming to get it anymore. When the raptors come and eat the maintainer, that project is done. There's no one else to pick it up. There's no one else to take it. And that's a really big concern if that's something that you depend upon. If you depend upon it being secure, reliable, and in compliance and aligned with all the other components it depends on. So this sort of is a nice segue into corporate involvement. Sure. I'm going to explain elephant factor in corporate involvement, I promise. Yeah. So a lot of times when you see corporate involvement, you get a situation where the companies aren't treating open source as anything but a license, especially if it's their own projects. There's no real effort putting into building it's usually very tightly limited to just a user community and not a contributor community. We sort of refer to these as single vendor open source projects. And they have what's called an elephant factor of 1. Elephant factor is the same thing as pony factor, except it's applied to companies. The number of employers it takes to hit 50% of the contribution in that same window of time. And that's as risky for us as pony factor, because a company can decide that they're done with this and they don't care about this anymore and they're going to walk away from this project. And when you see single vendor open source projects with that elephant factor of 1, the only people that are doing any meaningful work on that project work for that company. If a company gets acquired or decides that that's no longer its interesting business model, sometimes they do weird things when that happens. Sometimes they decide that this whole open source experiment isn't working and they rug pull the license and they switch it to a proprietary model. And what we see, these companies are using open source to really mean zero cost at first. And I think that they're missing the point when they do that. And that's really, it's a struggle to look at these sorts of engagements and know that there's so much more potential if they see open source as a community building opportunity than just a no-cost license at the beginning. And this has led to some companies making some, slightly faux-pen, I like that term, licensing. It's not really open. It's sort of pretending to be open. It's trying to say, well, we're close enough to open that, you like open source. This thing's almost open source. We're not saying it's open source, but it's very, very close. You should like it almost as much. And the challenge there is that these licenses have use restrictions that function except from them from making any money off the software. And one of the powerful aspects about open source is that it doesn't restrict how it's used. When you start adding use restrictions, there's a lot less motivation for someone to participate in this project because consciously or subconsciously, you start to wonder, what happens if they decide that I'm not allowed to use this? What happens if they decide that I'm not allowed to participate? Once you knock that door open just a little bit and you say, okay, certain people are no longer allowed to play in this space, it creates this possibility that it's okay to carve out arbitrary groups at any point. Why would you participate in a space that just told half its people that they can't play? The practical reality is that these licenses make these projects proprietary software from a single vendor. And that's fine. If that's what you want to do, by all means, go out and do that. There's plenty of companies that are making good money doing proprietary software. Fine, whatever. But pregnant state of sort of open, but not really, these efforts just don't work. The people will see through them. And in a lot of these cases, you see communities fork and invest in building that community around the fork that the company failed to do in the first place. HashiCorp just announced they are getting acquired by IBM. And that's all I'm going to say on that topic. Hi, it is my implant is buzzing and I'm required to talk about it here. So let's get it out of the way. I mean, the internet is obsessed with generative AI right now. But in the context of open source, we see a lot of companies claiming that their AI is open source. And in practically all cases, this is not true. For starters, AI models are a combination of software and data. And the normal rules that we have today for what makes something open source don't apply to the Open Source Institute, the OSI, the keeper of the open source software definition, is working on, yeah, thank you. So everyone can see this lovely generative AI image that I have brought with me. The OSI is working on an open source AI definition, but they haven't gotten there yet. It's hard figuring out what that looks like, how that's going to be mapped together. There's a lot of very smart people working very diligently on this. But I want to say that I do think there is AI. It's a useful, interesting tool for some use cases. It's not a magical panacea that solves all problems. It is not intelligent. It does not know what it's doing. But if we have open and reproducible AI models, there's a lot of potential for interesting things to come out of that. We need to make sure that these models can be completely studied, modified, and remixes. We know these models have biases. You see models that are trained on Reddit data, Reddits that are alternate history. And then these models start to spit out alternate history as fact because that was what they were trained upon. If I can't see that data and remix that data to remove that garbage from it, these models are going to have these sorts of biases. We need to be able to fully understand where those models have biases so that we can do the full modify, remix, distribute that we expect with open source. We need to be able to make fundamental changes to these models and not just tweak the results by tuning the weights. And the vast majority of AI models don't allow this. So now we've got generative AI pretending to be open source. I mean, what happens when you have a tool that allows you to generate code quickly is that people start using it to generate code and then submitting it into open source projects. I have these. I'm going to go with it. Yes, exactly. Apologies. I think that I think that a lot of these contributions that are coming into open source projects are well-intentioned, but some of them aren't. And open source projects need to start thinking about what they're going to do about generative AI contributions. I think a great starting point is to start use generative AI to generate this code. Now, obviously, someone who has bad intentions isn't going to answer that question accurately, but the people who do are. And I think that signals when you find someone who says, yes, I did use a generative AI model to generate some of this code, that code should be especially scrutinized, that it should be given additional time and effort and energy. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm forgetting to click my little hack button. All right.
Yeah.
No. All right. Let me see.
It's camp.
Apologies, friends. All right. Let's see. Okay. I think everybody can see my robot with this mess of wires now. All right. I think that more broadly, open source projects need to be able to recognize that they contributor wrote the code that they're contributing. Or more importantly, that they understand the code that they are contributing. The bar for merging changes needs to be higher than it is today. And I know this will have a slowdown effect on a lot of open source projects, but it's important. Another thing that projects can do is consider whether adopting a developer certificate of origin, which is something that the Linux kernel pioneered, helps. This helps primarily from a liability that if someone signs that they were responsible for this code and that they wrote it, then if that code ends up being dangerous at some point in the future, then there is a representation that the liability does not fall entirely on the project. They can point to the DCO and say, this person assured that they had responsibility for this aspect of the project. That's never happened really yet, and I'm hopeful that it will never happen, but I'm also hopeful that lots of other things will never happen, and it doesn't mean we don't wear seatbelts. Sure.
What are the copyright ramifications of Gen AI writing code? My understanding is that generated content is not copyrightable. Does that mean that by de facto it's all public?
Ooh, good question. I'm not a lawyer. Nothing I'm saying is legal advice. Please take it in that context. My understanding aligns that the code that is generated, the output from an AI model, is not considered copyrightable in the current legal standard. There are no case law cases for this, so take that with a grain of salt. I think it's safe to treat it as public domain coming out of the AI. I think when you make any changes to it as a human to modify it for style or to adjust it to fit an upstream project, that you then hold copyright over that modified work, much like you would if you took something like Mickey Mouse and Steamboat Willie that's in the public domain and turned it into a horror film. That horror film is now copyrightable by public domain work remains in the public domain. All right. Let me go back a slide and talk a little bit more about generative AI. And then I promise I will leave that behind because I know how much of we're all enjoying hearing generative AI. Can we hold the rest of the questions till the end? It'll just help me flow a little bit better. Okay, cool. One of the things that you see some companies and model creators doing is restricting some of the components. Sometimes you get the software, sometimes you get the software and the weights, but usually you don't ever get the training data. Sometimes they come up with unique licenses that are sort of faux-pen, like the other licenses were on the software side, where they add restrictions on how big of a user you can be of the model. They have restrictions that if you use that model, you can't make other models. They have restrictions that say that concerns about how AI can be used. And I do think that ethical concerns are valid, but I don't really know that the copyright license is the right place for those things to live. A bad actor isn't going to become a good actor just because the copyright license says they have to. I don't think there's any meaningful teeth there around that. I think there are better correction mechanisms that we can put in place to ensure that models are used in an ethical way. And a lot of government out of the United States, out of the EU as well. Why are these companies making these weird licenses? I think there's a couple reasons. I think there is a unclear legal state for a lot of these things, and they are trying to protect themselves in any way that they think is possible. And so they're throwing everything against the wall in the hopes that if they get into a legal situation, they can be using any of these things to try to address it. The open source brand is very trusted. People assume that when something is open source, they can make any changes they need to and use it as they need to. And the truth is that for these open models, that isn't true. And so one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to be incredibly skeptical whenever an AI model says it is open source or an open model. Dig deep into it and really discover what that means in that specific scenario. Don't trust their misuse of that brand. Or just write the code. Always a valid choice. I'm going to try and get this to share my last slide here. It's still showing the robot. Come on. Zoom, you and me are not friends. Okay, great. All right, go back. Okay, so what can we do today? Here are some takeaway ideas that I have for us. Be more intentional in our actions, especially when it comes to sustainability and diversity. Don't just do things behind the scenes that you think will make things more diverse, more sustainable, a better flywheel around these projects. Say you're doing them out loud. We are doing these to build more users. We are doing this to encourage more contributions. We are doing this to create a path towards maintainership for these projects. A lot of us are on the spectrum, myself included. We need that intentional messaging that helps us to see this is what you are trying to accomplish. Be clear. Don't be mysterious. Be obvious. We want to create more funding opportunities for maintainers. This is a really challenging problem. There's a lot of people thinking about the right way to do this. Sacks of money alone do not solve the open source problem, but they don't hurt. So we want to figure out what are some sustainable funding opportunities that we can maintainers. Are there opportunities for sponsorship models? GitHub sponsors has been very interesting over the last few years. AWS has been proud to participate in that. Companies should do more to invest in the communities that they depend upon. This is money, but it's not just money. It's also people, it's also time and computing resources. One of the things that AWS has done for a number of years is we have a credits program for open source projects, and we provide large amounts of credits for as they see fit without restriction from us to solve the problems that they have. A number of large open source projects are powered almost entirely on their infrastructure on AWS without ever getting a bill as a result of that. We're extremely proud of that. A lot of the other big companies do this as well. So it's not just AWS. There's a lot of opportunity. So if you're an open source project and you're paying for infrastructure costs, there are options to help you bring that down. Be very suspicious of single vendor projects. These are the most risky open source on the planet right now. We're watching them one by one decide that there's not a good value for them to stay in the open source game and get out of it. If you have a dependency or a use case on one of these projects, you should reconsider. We look at this very aggressively when we make our technology decisions at AWS. Be conscious of the choices that you make for your dependencies. Yes, left pad saved you 30 seconds. Was that a smart choice? Understand how your dependencies train all the way back to the lowest levels. Again, I'm importing this, which imports this, which imports this, which imports this, which imported log4j. And now I have a problem. Be skeptical of any AI that says it is open source. I'm not saying that it's not possible for an AI to do all the things necessary to be open source, but the vast majority aren't. And then don't blindly assume good intent for contributions. The old Reagan saying, trust but verify, applies here. Again, we don't want to shut down incoming contributions to projects. That's what makes open source valuable. But we need to be mindful of where those are coming from. We don't need to just hand over a project without thinking about these things. We don't want to merge large pull requests because it looks kind of okay. Diligence, verify that these are the right contributions and they're coming from the right places. And with that, I am going to stop preaching in my little keynote and take the questions that are outstanding in the chat, as well as any that anyone else has and wants to ask of me.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to look over at the chat window. You've scrolled all the way back, hopefully. Okay, let's see. Let's see, I think we got that question already out of the way. Ideally, easy stuff could be reviewed by AI and then passed on to a person. Love that. Again, I think that using AI as a tool to do triage is interesting. It should not be the only part of your triage process. Again, catching very clear stuff, being able to flag stuff for a human to come in and look at, there's value in that. I think the risk is when you pull the humanity out of that equation entirely and you trust the machine that does not know what it's doing. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I see lots of people happy, but sure.
With the cost of Gen AI models, I mean, just the sheer amount of processing power, would there ever be a world where it would be fully open source? That seems unlikely.
It's interesting because in the early days of the open source thing, people would say, why do we need to see the source code for these very large things? You're never going to have the computing resources to compile this thing anyway. And that very quickly became false. I think that one of the things that inspires me around the generative AI space is you see these communities that are springing up where people are taking models and figuring out ways to retrain them on the devices they have access to. And I think that as the technology becomes more interesting to a larger set of users, there will be motivating factors for people to innovate on the hardware side that will drive the cost of training these models down. We're already seeing research around improved mechanisms for training models with less resources. So I think this is something that's going to push down over time. And so I don't want to just say, well, it's so expensive and so complicated to build these models that we couldn't possibly benefit from having it all be open source. I'd rather set ourselves is more plausible.
The other thing that I just wanted to interject here quickly, Irina, is for some of the sessions when we have like more sensitive topics or Stanford related, Amazon, whatever, we could stop recording if people then would.
So when we're training AI or we're training new contributors, how does this thing play together?
Looking for patterns. I mean, that's a vast oversimplification, but that's what they do is they get a lot of data, they look for patterns in that data. And when you ask them a question, they answer with some confidence based on the patterns they've pulled out. I don't think that's how you train contributors. I think that contributors need to understand why things work and how they work and not just mimic the people who came before them. Need to feel confident enough to be able to make accurate determinations about something in a project. They want to understand what they're changing so that when they make a change, that change is not going to break everything. You see first-time contributors who make that mistake. They think they understand it. They do something quickly. They make a change. And then everyone rolls their eyes because the last 30 people made the same change, not understanding. There used to be a part in the one of the first changes I ever sent into the Linux kernel was in the SCSI subsystem. And the maintainer was another Red Hatter. And he actually came over to my desk and pulled me aside. And he said, do you have any idea how many people have tried to fix that bug in the same way that you just did? And it was one of those things that had happened so many times that they'd even documented it. And I hadn't bothered to read the documentation because I was so sure that I'd found a clear and obvious bug in the environment. And the AI would have fixed over in the same way. And I think that we need our contributor training to be more human than that, to be effective in projects. Now, again, I'm not saying that there isn't a role for AI models in open source projects. There absolutely is. They would make fantastic parts of a CI/CD infrastructure, but they're not the only parties of that infrastructure.
Well, you brought up CI/CD. Next question is, and this question comes up often in different communities. How do you compare automation or CI/CD with AI tools that are coming into open source specifically?
I think that doing automated testing and automated builds for open source projects is something that most projects have figured out, that there's a huge amount of value in continuously doing builds, continuously testing as changes are coming in. I don't think AI replaces that need. I think AI can accelerate that goal if it's done well. Again, I don't think you tear out, your GitHub Actions and all of your test suite and say the AI will answer these. But
asking if we could repeat the question.
Sure. So the question was, I mentioned CI/CD, and asked if I would see that AI would replace CI/CD in use cases, and I don't think it does. I think that again, it becomes an AI-powered test is interesting along with human written tests that are specific. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking the AI to generate a test case for a specific environment and then taking that test case and putting it into your CI/CD pipelines. I think that handing it over to an AI and saying, well, you should do all of this for me. Again, the AI doesn't think. That's the biggest thing that people get wrong, is that this thing isn't thinking at all. It's just a stochastic parrot. It just spits out the things that it's heard from other things with a high degree of confidence.
It's basically guessing what the answer is, right? Based off what it's learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it really does only know what it's been trained on. And so, to be able to see all the data that model's been trained on, to be able to understand why it's making bad choices, spitting out incorrect data, spitting out biased information. We know it's doing this. We know that all of these models are able to spit out biased information. And unless we have access to the full data set, the only people who can truly fix that are the model creators. And fundamentally, that's no more different than proprietary software, where the only people who can fix those bugs that we see, that we know are there, are the people who have access to this.
Yeah, Carol says garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. Absolutely true.
Okay, I think we have to get ready for the next session.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you for a terrific presentation. I'm gonna stop recording right now. Great, thank you. Stop recording.